Three departing members who I'd like to recognize today. I don't think any of them, unfortunately, are here today, but I would still like to honor them and review a couple of their accomplishments. Denise Baumann has served on the research board for 4 years. She was an advisor to the Measure to 34 ballot measure study and also a long-term study on education finance that will be published shortly. She also helped draft study charges for the education finance study and the City of Portland Fire, Police, Disability, and Retirement study, which was published recently and has had quite an impact. She was a previous member of the Billboard Regulation Study, and unfortunately, she's going to be moving from Portland very soon, so I think that we won't be seeing much of her around City Club, but we do appreciate her involvement. Mark Magnuson is finishing 3 years on the research board. He was an advisor to the Early Childhood long-term study that was published earlier this year. He also helped craft the FPDNR study charge and served on 2 ballot measure studies before joining the research board. And lastly, BJ Seymour, a very long-time member of the City Club, is ending her 2nd term on the research board. She previously served from 1993 to 96. And she has been involved in 13 research studies since joining in 1973 when women were first admitted to the club. She's chaired 4 of those studies and has been an advisor on 3. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the entire research board. They're an incredibly intelligent and dedicated group of people who I've been honored to serve with. Thank you.
And now I want to recognize the outgoing members of the Board of Governors who've served the club so well for not only in the last year, but 2 and sometimes 3 years. And as I read your names, I would like you to come forward and receive a token of our appreciation. Gwen Milius. Gwen was liaison to the New Leaders Council and a frequent board host. It always went well when Gwen was up here. Andy Sloop, outgoing first vice president and chair of the research board. And Andy's service to the club goes back to the 90s with mine. He was the co-chair of the issue committees with me. Thank you, Andy. And Chris Smith, governor and past chair of the advocacy committee. And I'll have more to say about Chris in a second. And Corleen Kraft, our immediate past president. Corleen served as president of the club. Corleen served as president of the club in the first year of our new strategic plan to increase our relevance to the community. The symbol of this change was the move to our new headquarters at City Club Commons. Corleen has continued her long tenure as a member of the Friday Forum Committee, and she's a past chair of that committee. She's also served and led several club research projects. To recognize Corleen's service, I'd like to also present a token of appreciation from the Board of Governors, which in recognition of her many interests is a gift certificate to PALS. Thanks to all of you we've recognized today for your service to the club and to the civic life of Portland. And before we proceed with the election of officers, I have some special club awards to bestow. For outstanding service in research during the past year, the 2006 Research Award goes to Eva Schweber. I'm sorry, Eva, I did that before. This is for her service as chair of the Fire, Police, Disability, and Retirement System Research Committee. Eva led her committee on a complex assignment. Their independent review of the Police and Fire Fund has set a benchmark for the city's action on this issue. Eva continues to lead the club's advocacy for the report recommendations. Her work embodies the ideal of City Club volunteer research. Thank you, Eva. And for her outstanding service to the club and the Friday Forum Committee this year, the 2006 Member of the Year award goes to Carla Kelly. Carla began chairing the Friday Forum Committee last year when Nikki Lynch passed away. Carla led a grieving committee to reassemble and build the vibrant program schedule we've all enjoyed this past year. Thank you, Carla. And as president, I also have the prerogative of giving special awards to those who have made significant contributions to the work of the club this year. I have the privilege to honor two members who have shown incredible commitment to the City Club and its mission. First, Gwen Milius. Gwen's lasting contribution to the club is having helped found the new Leaders Council, and she served on the Board of Governors for the past 3 years. I think of Gwen as a Ms. Fix-It in the club. She designed our new club logo, and she's willingly accepted assignments, big and small, just because the work needed to be done. Thank you, Gwen. And next, Chris Smith. Chris's hard work and vision led the development of our advocacy program to be a core part of the club's work. His diligence and attention to detail will be a lasting benefit to the club's advocacy role. Like Gwen, Chris has been an enthusiastic leader in many other aspects of the club's growth, and he's always there to pitch in when we needed the extra help. Thank you, Chris. And now we award City Club's highest honor, the City Club Award. This award is given in recognition for lifetime service to the club and the community. It's both with great sadness and tremendous respect that we give this award to Sid Lezak posthumously. Sid was a leader in this organization and the city for better part of 5 decades. He was instrumental in the admission of women to City Club in 1973, and he was a constant beacon for fairness and justice throughout the community. Portland remembers Sid for the many roles he played in our community, certainly well beyond the halls of City Club. And that is what our City Club Award seeks to acknowledge, that in addition to his legendary role in our club, they played such a wide and vast role in shaping Portland's civic culture. Just examples of the breadth of his community service include trustee of the Foundation for Public Broadcasting, commissioner on the Metropolitan Human Relations Commission, and the boards of the Nature Conservancy, Planned Parenthood, and the Actors Production Company. Many Portlanders say that one of Sid's most important legacies is that he was a mentor who helped young people find their way into professional and civic life. Today, Sid's wife, Muriel Lezak, accepts this award on behalf of the Lezak family. Mrs. Lezak? In my last official act as City Club President, I'll proceed with the elections of officers and governors. First, I'll introduce our returning members of the board, and they are Bill Kramer, a consultant in healthcare and health policy, who returns as the treasurer. Bill's son is getting married tomorrow, so he is not with us today. Good priorities. Tamsin Wassell, a partner at the consulting firm of RTS, LLC, will return as secretary. Tamsin? Just wave or something. Okay. Yeah. Kirsten Green, a principal with Kogan Owens Kogan, will continue in her positions as governor and chair of the Advocacy and Awareness Board. Chip Lazenby, an attorney with Bullivant Hauser Bailey, will continue as governor. Jake Okenberg, lead singer and pianist for the Portland-based pop rock band The Retrofits, will continue his position as governor and chair of the membership committee. Ron Paul, who serves as vice chair of the Oregon Arts Commission and consults with business, government, and the nonprofit sector as a civic entrepreneur, will continue as governor. Norma Paulus, former state legislator, former secretary of state, and former superintendent of public instruction, and former member of the Northwest Power Planning Council, will continue as governor. And I, Doug Marker, director of the Northwest Power Planning Council's Fish and Wildlife Division, will serve as immediate past president. We'll now proceed with the election of the new 2006-2007 officers and governors. Susan Hammer, an attorney, mediator, and arbitrator who focuses on business and employment disputes, automatically becomes president. Don Williams, the chief operating officer at Schwabe, Williamson & Wyatt, is nominated to become president-elect. Brian Campbell, a land use and transportation planning consultant who recently retired from the Port of Portland, and the new chair of the club's research board, automatically becomes first vice president. Sue Thomas, co-founder of Avatar, Inc., and the new vice chair of the club's research board, is nominated to become second vice president. John Horvick, the project director for the Parents and Children Together study at Oregon Health and Science University, is nominated to become a governor and new leaders council liaison. Marge Kafori, who directed Portland's Office of Government Relations for 19 years, is nominated to become a governor. Carla Kelly, general counsel of Port of Portland, and who filled the unexpired term on the board, has been nominated to continue to serve as governor and chair of the Friday Forum Committee. Lawrence Wallach, dean of the College of Urban and Public Affairs at Portland State University, who filled an unexpired term on the board, has been nominated to continue to serve as governor. The above nominees have been selected by the club's nominating committee according to the bylaws. There is a mechanism in the bylaws which allows other nominations from the membership, provided 3 written recommendations from club members and a signed agreement from the nominee is submitted within 10 days of the annual meeting. No other names have been submitted for election. I therefore declare the nominees elected by unanimous consent. And a special thanks once again to Gwen Milius, who chaired the City Club's nominating committee this year. You have an outstanding board for 2006 through 2007, and I wish you all a productive and rewarding year. I also want to take a moment to recognize the City Club's outstanding staff. Tim DeRoche, our office manager. Tim Kraus, our communications coordinator. Margaret Eichmann, our membership and development director. Wade Fickler, our research director. And our executive director, Wendy Rodmacher-Willis. Wendy is completing her 3rd year as our executive director. These have been 3 years of growth and innovation for the club. I want to thank Wendy for her passion, her vision, and invite her to make a few remarks.
Thank you, Doug. The last time I talked about Doug leaving the board, I cried, so I'll try not to do that today. It's been a pleasure to work with Doug and the entire board this year, and I'm really thrilled to think about the year ahead with Susan and the new board. There's so much energy and vision here. I'm thrilled. I could talk to you about the accomplishments of the year, and there are many, but you can read about those in the bulletin. What I'd like to talk to you about is I've been thinking a lot this year about what it means to be a citizen. And by that, I don't mean what our rights are about as being a citizen. I mean what it means to have citizen as part of our personal identity. The culture is full of guidance about how to be a parent or a worker, and especially about how to be a consumer, a participant in the economy. But it's hard on a cultural scale to understand our identity as citizens. Of course, this question has been sharpened by the public debate about immigration. And that's an important debate to have and an essential debate to have. But what I'm looking for is broader than that. I want to understand our identity as citizens of the place where we live, regardless of our legal status. I imagine a more internal sense of citizenship, one that arises out of a sense of place, not conferred by a government, but one that's inspired by our connection to a place and our commitment to the other people who share it. I want to understand what happens when we no longer see our community as just a place to live and work and go to school, but the place that we truly inhabit, the place where we put down roots, the place that will be the legacy to our children and to our neighbors' children. In that sense, I ask myself and I ask you, How do we become the citizens that Portland needs, that Oregon needs? Without guidance from television or newspaper, or even books and schools, how do we make our way? Participatory citizenship is not happening in the big culture. It's not happening out there in the presidential elections, in the national media, or on the Sunday morning talk shows. Those are the things that in fact make us feel like we don't belong in public life. But this is where City Club comes in. This is where I believe that we, are truly making the world safe for democracy. That's where we see our neighbors and friends rise up and inhabit their role as citizen. This is where we affirm to one another that we are smart enough and trustworthy enough to govern ourselves. Of course, you all know about many of the things that have happened at City Club this year, the lion-hearted work of Eva Schweber and the FPD&R committee, and many of you have witnessed magic happen here at Friday Forums as well, where people who have never met have connected about an idea or have reached across a political divide about a shared interest, or even where a candidate actually says something unexpected. There was a trip that 20 City Club members took to the John Day Basin this last October. By goodwill and openness, our members connected with the citizens of Fossil and Condon and Spray. They had frank discussions about natural resources and property ownership and even tax policy. Our members tried to understand the point of view of other Oregonians, and they were met with tremendous generosity in return. But there have been quiet moments too, incidents that seem unremarkable on the surface, but that involve an individual stepping out of his or her private sphere and speaking to the common good. One of those incidents actually happened at a presentation that Jake Oakenberg and I did at Zimmer Genzel Frasca earlier this year. We were invited to talk to a group of younger associates at ZGF in a late afternoon reception. Our host that day was Greg Baldwin. Greg has been a member of City Club for decades, and he stood up to welcome us and introduce us to these young members of his firm, many of whom were incredibly new to Portland as well. He told us, that he's one of 4 generations of City Club members. And then he stood up and talked from his heart about what Portland means to him, how he feels about the city, and he told us that the city he loves is safe is only as long as the next generation protects it, only as long as the next generation steps outside their private interest and advocates for the good of the whole, only as long as the next generation claims it and does right by it. That was a moment of citizenship, right there in the middle of the day at work. And strangely, one of the other moments of citizenship I remember arose on an email exchange, if you can believe it. The program committee, who many of you know is a spirited group, you've hired them to have opinions, and they don't let you down in that regard. But between meetings, sometimes things will come up where they'll have to have a debate about a program, and they'll do it by email. This last winter, a really animated electronic debate started about a particular forum. And 2 members of the program committee spent an entire day basically battling. They kept stating and restating their point of view about I can't tell you what it is because the program committee operates under a dome of silence. But they spent their entire day sort of stating and restating their point of view. And most of us on this list just sat on the sidelines or made an occasional comment. But around 5 o'clock, a remarkable thing happened. One of the combatants sent a 1-line email, and it said, "I've listened to what you've said, and I am persuaded." It was stunning. I realized how infrequently we hear these words at all. We're used to people staking out their position and sticking to it. It never even crosses our mind that people might be listening, let alone that they might be persuaded by what someone else has said. Yeah, that is what it means to be a citizen. That is what it means to step in the Commons. And that is what it means to be a City Club member. There are hundreds of examples that happened this year. All of us in this room could think of several of them. And this is what should give us hope. We may not have a cultural blueprint on how to construct ourselves as citizens, but here at City Club, we are leading each other by example, one conversation and email at a time. Thank you.
There are 2 jobs that go with being president of the City Club. One is with any nonprofit is presiding over a volunteer board and shaping the direction and the performance of the organization. I feel privileged to have served in this role in a time of rebirth for the club. Our club has new purpose as it turns 90 years old. By the way, how many people still have a 75th anniversary coffee mug? There's a few out there. Our many programs have engaged a broader reach of Portland citizens. This board and our staff have brightened the vision of City Club as Portland's public square. My other job is one not shared by the leaders of many other nonprofits, and that is to preside at the weekly Friday Forum. Last year, our former president, Charlie Hinkle, told me that it's a rare experience to be on the podium with the cast of speakers that come to City Club, and that has certainly been true. I've introduced both the United States Surgeon General and the United States Comptroller General. I introduced a Chinese-American storyteller and the Doyen of Dirt. And there are moments you don't expect. We had one speaker who was so nervous that she spent the first 5 minutes of the panel discussion in the bathroom. I was trying to figure out what I was going to say about childhood poverty. Last summer, we had a fire alarm go off just before the program began. Wendy was out of town that week. I was trying to figure out who was in charge, and then I realized it was probably me. And one speaker began earnestly explaining to me, just before the 12:15 broadcast call, why it's unlikely that I'll contract avian flu from sharing a microphone. Those incidents aside, I've been most proud to introduce programs where Portlanders gather to just talk about important city and state issues. Our candid forum on the Portland Development Commission, for instance. Our recent program talking about the effects of growing traffic congestion on our economy. Thank you for the opportunity to serve as your president. And now it's my pleasure to turn the office over to our new president, Susan Hammer. Susan.
Doug looks unusually happy today, I think. Nothing nicer than being a past something or another. Yeah. Doug Marker has served City Club with distinction during the past year. You all know about the visible part. He's here nearly every Friday out of the year, well prepared to introduce speakers and programs and to chair the meeting. He's solid and he's unflappable, even when the fire alarms go off. But there is all the less visible work that you might be not aware of. There are daily conversations with board and staff and other members of City Club. There are board meetings. There is just the perennial task of keeping an eye on City Club and its growth while not losing focus on the quality and the mission. This all adds up to a rather demanding part-time job, and Doug has done that with vision, with enthusiasm, and with good humor. So Doug, on behalf of the City Club and with great appreciation for your work, I'd like to present you with your plaque for service as president. And I want to thank the members of City Club for the opportunity to be here today and to serve as your president. As we enter our 90th year, I'm mindful of the timeless quality of a citizens' forum against the background noise of talk radio, televised shouting matches, and partisan bickering. We still have the opportunity to come here every week to experience the power of ideas, to think, explore, and debate those issues involving the public good and the legacy that we're leaving to others. I'm looking forward to a really great year, moving forward with even richer programming, if that's possible, quality research, civic engagement with a larger and more diverse membership, diverse by our politics, our age, and our ethnicity. I'm also looking forward to finding ways that we can leverage the work of this club to have an even greater impact on the community. We're reaching 15,000 or more, actually, households every week through the radio and TV broadcasts. The City Club reports, as you know, just from reading editorials in the Oregonian, are having an enormous effect on shaping city policy, but there's yet much more we can do. Thank you again for the honor and privilege to serve. Broadcast of the City Club programs this quarter are made possible in part by corporate underwriting by Kaiser Permanente and by Stolries LLP. Please join me in thanking our sponsors for their support. We are so fortunate to have with us today Paul Bragdon speaking on a time of transition, City Club and society. Paul served as president of Reed College from 1971 to 1988, subsequently serving as president of Oregon Graduate Institute and interim president of Lewis and Clark College, earning himself the reputation as a turnaround artist for ailing educational institutions. Paul knows about transition. He has been a member of City Club since 1971, so he does have the historical perspective. He knows about transition on a personal level as well. He claims he's still trying to figure out what he's going to do when he grows up, and as he says, it's becoming increasingly ludicrous. Paul's community service is too extensive to be cited here, but I will mention one because of our connection, the City Club connection with the library, and that is Paul's service as chair of the Multnomah Library Foundation and the fact that he was honored with the first Paul E. Bragdon Library Leadership Award in 2001. As a native New Englander, Paul has been cursed with a long love of the Boston Red Sox, causing him heartbreak most of the time, but great joy in one glorious year. Please join me in welcoming Paul Bragdon.
Thank you very much, Susan. Congratulations. The weight of office does not seem to weigh heavily on you, at least as yet. And I do see, along with tears of sadness in departing the office, that you do look as though a burden has been removed from you. Yeah, yes, well, you know, this business of a turnaround artist, that's the last thing I would ever expect to be or be called. It was actually Michael Powell who first said that, and the only person who said that to me. I have no real desire to go in and find trouble situations. I think the institutional and human costs are so great that no one wants to deal with those. I don't find that cutting or staying within budgets is a lot of fun. I do think that we are associated with these institutions in the belief that they must continue into the future and not just while we're here. And I do think that these things, such as budget discipline, are a necessary preliminary to the things that you really get fun out of, and that is in giving, in my case, in finding ways to give support to the women and men who teach and learn in the institution, and seeing very good things happen to improve and enhance the environment for teaching and learning and scholarly activities. So I don't think turnaround artist, as much as I admire Michael Powell and what he has done in a very competitive industry in a troubled time, I don't know that I agree completely with his assessment, but I do thank you, Michael. Transitions, you know, you've heard of the conversation of Adam and Eve when they left the garden. He said to her, "This is a time of transition," which is to say that it's always a time of transition of one sort or another. Sometimes we recognize it, sometimes we identify it when it's a footnote to some greater transition, and often it's recognized after the event. Looking at this audience today, I see that there are people that were here the first time I addressed the City Club some years ago. Ernie Bonahati, hello. Ogden, Beeman, hello to you. And I see as well people that were not associated with the club, many of whom could not have been associated with the club earlier, not having been born in all probability at the time I gave my first speech. So we do see that we have the experienced and the venerable and the commitment and consistency of interest, but we see a continuing transition as other people come into the club and try to make their own contribution to its work and in engagement with our city and its issues and problems and enriching it. So that is a continuing tradition today. I would say, too, that Sid Lezak, I don't know that he was, but Sid Lezak could also have been at a club meeting when I first came. And I'm so happy that he received the recognition from the City Club today, which represents the feelings in the hearts and minds of a great many people in this city. He was a unique figure and unusual in what he managed to accomplish. I think he is an inspiration to that new group coming in to make transitions in this club. He's a model. I wouldn't try to emulate his style or try to do what he did, but I think in your own way, you should try to do the sort of thing that he managed to do during his own life. Now, it is a real transition today in that we've just had an election. We've had a transfer of office and members of the board. We've had those who've departed office, not from the club, but departed office and departed from the board. We have a new president, new officers, and some new members of the board. So we mark the accomplishments of the past year and the immediate past, and with a new board, we look forward to both to continuity and a real willingness and eagerness to attack the agenda for this year and the coming time ahead. So, and I think we want to thank them and appreciate what they've been done and support those who are going to carry the work and many of the responsibilities as the club goes forward. I think at a time like this, it probably is a good time to be self-conscious a bit about one, or at least conscious of your mission. And it appears at the bottom of the program, to inform its members and the community in public matters and to arouse in them a realization of the obligations of citizenship. I don't see that there would be anyone who would want to change the mission or expand upon it. It's a valid mission. I think looking at the interview Wednesday, and if you have not seen Wendy's interview in the Journal of Commerce, it's something that you really should look at. So these are really not my own ideas, but pick up from what I can infer and what was said in that interview. Should we remain vigilant to avoid partisanship and personalities and the influence of the prevailing and prior conceptions of the memberships. In other words, be willing to find and accept new information and have one's own ideas and opinions put to the test and challenged. Most important, continue to recognize that your resources are limited and judgment and discretion are necessary to ensure that the most significant issues are the ones selected for investigation and possible action. Now, personally, I would express my own hope that there will be time and attention to the issue of economic activity in Greater Portland in the context of sustainable environment. Some years ago, in the line of work I was in, higher education and being a president of an institution, I became aware of what I should have known all along, that whatever we were doing, whatever we were able to do, because society itself or a lot of individuals or other institutions in society were giving us support. And they could give that support to us only if there were economic activity and productivity that produced the wherewithal that some of it could be shared on public or nonprofit purposes. One of my concerns, quite frankly, is the level of economic activity and the creation of new enterprises and of well-paying jobs of the type we would like to have in this or any other community. So I think that to examine some of the issues that might enhance or may be inhibiting economic development, being mindful of at all times that we wish whatever we do to be in the context of a sustainable environment, is something I hope the club will pay attention to. Not too long ago, I think it's important to say that a mission can be valid and valuable work can be done that is appreciated, useful, and influential, but sometimes an organization, even within its mission and pursuing it, can develop organizational habits and customs and practices which inhibit it from moving forward and realizing its aspirations for itself. I think this is true of any institution, certainly not just the City Club. But some years ago, there was part of the history of the club was it being an all-male organization. The decision to admit women was not only right, but it greatly expanded the reservoir of brains, intelligence, judgment, committed members, and points of view in identifying and pursuing issues. My own observation is that a period of renewal, energy, and activity followed that action. More recently, the club has taken steps to become more visible, accessible, inviting by moving not from the ivory tower or from Mount Olympus, but from ordinary downtown office space to street-level space, inviting people, permitting interaction, and allowing those with common interests to gather and interact with each other, and to have programs that can have of a social, quasi-social, and club purposeful activity. So I think both of those things are positive steps. I know of no other steps that the club should find necessary now, and if I did know them, I would suggest it privately to the officers of the club and would not presume to say it. But I do think that I can say some things about how I think the club should go about its business, and I think I can do so because I would say it about any other institution. So as far as a state of mind, I think there should be great pride in the past City Club contributions, commitment to the quality of the existing programs, commitment to a process of continuing review and renewal, a conviction that even a very good club can be made even better, and recognition of the possibility that it may be the best days of the City Club are still lie ahead of us, and trying to reach those better days and best days while you are active in the club. Now, on occasions like this, when we change officers and board members and start a new year for the club, is probably timely to present a vision, preferably inspirational, bringing to a close-up view the shore but distantly seen at the present time. Since the City Club really speaks about the role of the individual in forming the citizen, and then talking of the citizens as a whole rising to their obligations and doing things in the interest of all, it would be appropriate to issue inspirational words on the subject of the individual and the balance between the individual and community. I'm sorry to say that my track record is so poor on this subject that you picked the wrong people to talk about a very appropriate thing. And by way of explanation, let me share with you my remarks made just short of 20 years ago, remarks ending with a prediction and a prophecy. No point in trying to hide them. They're part of the public record and you can look them up. I began my remarks on that occasion by quoting a well-known political scientist who had said that a central question of the modern age is whether the state exists for the individual or the individual for the state. With modern totalitarianism in its various forms enforcing more completely and brutally the individual to the state, we can hope more strongly than ever before that our own society is closer to one which has the state existing for the individual. Indeed, the impersonal nature and overwhelming bureaucracies of our complex modern world impel us to reassert the claims of the individual and individualism and to seek a greater decentralization in society. I hold these same views today. Indeed, with the various assertions and manifestations of the power of the state, the power of the executive branch, I would express those concerns more forcefully and with more foreboding than I did 20 years ago. As it happens on that occasion, however, the remarks I've just cited were comments serving as a preface to my principal subject, which was stated this way. I started by saying the issue confronting all of us, is well stated by Professor Robert Bella of Berkeley and his co-authors in describing the purpose of their book, Habits of the Heart, Individualism and Commitment in American Life. The central problem of our book, they write, concerns the American individualism that Tocqueville described with a mixture of admiration and anxiety. It seems to us that it is individualism and not equality, as Tocqueville thought, that has marched inexorably through our history. We are concerned that this individual may have grown cancerous. We are concerned that it has grown cancerous, that it may be destroying those social integrants that Tocqueville saw as moderating its more destructive potentialities. And having quoted that, I went on to say, not to be concerned about the amenities, the aesthetics, the quality of life, the very functioning of our cities and towns, and the preservation of our natural resources and conservation of our natural wonders, not to be care about the fate of the dispossessed, not to be interested in intervening to protect the poor, the weak, and those who are or have been discriminated against, not to have passion in seeking to preserve the human race and the world we inhabit, not, in short, to respond to the claims of community. All of these are signs of excessive, even obscene individualism. It is the sort of individualism that celebrates individual accomplishments without reference to the cooperative social efforts contributing to the feat. A young Vietnamese woman is saluted as she prepares to graduate from West Point without appreciating of the cooperative efforts of the civil rights and women's movement which helped make it possible. An elderly woman in New York City is honored for care of children of drug and alcohol-addicted parents without recognition of the federal programs supporting the children. President Reagan singles out for praise the physician, son of Italian immigrants, who struggled to become a surgeon. The surgeon who, as it happens, operated on the president after he was shot in 1981. It remained for the surgeon himself, the physician, to explain that he never would have been able to get through medical school without the cooperation of society in the form of federal student assistance programs. The sort of individualism, too, that debates federal student assistance exclusively on the issues of benefit to the individual and the worthiness of the recipient. No mention of the value of enhancing the education of our citizenry, of the possible contribution to a better society. No descriptions of the program as a cooperative social enterprise with possible benefits for all. Moving from what I said 20 years ago to what I observed this morning as I read of the kicker going into operation with $1 billion fund to be refunded to the taxpayers, I can't help but think of schools and colleges and universities which are in trouble, those who benefit by social programs not having the benefit of that assistance. I hear and sometimes participate in the criticism of our crumbling infrastructure, and so there are serious infrastructure needs. And I think, well, this is an individualism if in fact we return it to the individuals instead of using all or some of that money to meet some of the needs that we've said. Now I say that being perfectly aware that there are many of our citizens who indeed need every cent they are currently receiving and more, and this return, however small it may be in their cases, might be a meaningful thing. I think the larger issue is that we should all benefit, and some individuals of need especially, from using these funds, mostly at least, to attend to many of the things that bother us, many of the needs of the state of Oregon, many of the things that are making other people think of this state in a way quite different from they did just a few short years ago. In any case, that aside, behind us, I did conclude my remarks at that time by a prediction. And I said, although I am neither historian nor prophet, I am certain that there will be a reaction to excessive individualism, just as there has been a reaction to that which preceded it. And I do want to mention that little qualifying clause, that in part what has happened in recent years is a reaction to some of the things which had preceded it and was introduced as a supposed corrective to some of those things. And that there will be and I say that there will be a reassertion and recommitment to the claims of community and social cooperation. When it will happen and in what form, I know not, but happen it assuredly will. Well, nearly 20 years have passed since my bold prediction, and the turn I foresaw has yet to take place. If anything, much of our culture today celebrates values and actions representing in a crude way an individual which Robert Bellow and his fellow authors would call cancerous. Our political and public life, complementing or perhaps reflecting the form of this form of individualism, slights and gives shorter shrift to the commons and to the claims of community, the quality of the society to which we all belong, and the well-being of our citizenry as a whole than it did 20 years ago. To be fair, the picture is not all bleak and dark. Philanthropy continues to play a very considerable role in our society, and a beneficial one. Secondly, volunteerism, that notable American practice noted in the early days of the Republic by Tocqueville, flourishes in Portland. Many seek out opportunities and give freely of their time, and most organizations are inviting and welcoming the City Club among the foremost in that category. While Portland may be unsurpassed and unsurpassable in this respect, there are certainly similar impulses, responses, and opportunities elsewhere in the state and in these United States. As the fruits of these extraordinary collective efforts show, the commons and the claim of community are certainly being served to a very significant extent. I think where college students, incoming college students are today, may offer some lessons, some hints about the feelings of the society at large. As it happens, there have been longitudinal studies of the attitudes across a broad range of issues for well over 30 years in higher education. So one can trace changes in student attitudes in everything from religion to politics to social habits, social views on a wide range of issues. At the present time, the attitudes of college students, much more so than was the case in the 1980s, which were more self and personal ambition oriented, show a marked interest in engagement in community activities and service to the community. They show also a great deal of activity by students in those organizations as active participants. The same surveys show, however, that there is very little interest in entering the political process or political parties to attack the larger issues in the public square. I don't know that a definitive answer or reason can be given for that, But I do know that it is that they don't think they can affect things in that arena and that they can affect the things that they're working on. So in a sense, what they're saying is we're powerless in this arena. And I think that what is true of incoming college students is true of other generations throughout our society and a great many people in our society. And I think it speaks to a breakdown in the political process so that in some respects it has been dysfunctional. This audience, I will say that some of these things are clearly a question of process, use of money in campaign, modern day gerrymandering, and other such things. Others have to do with the tools of modern communications and modern politics and how they are used. And they may be very effective in a specific campaign or campaigns, but cumulatively, I suspect, they create an alienation and a pretty well-founded cynicism. So there's a very big agenda, it seems, both on procedural things that are definable and can be attacked, on some rather larger issues that are more difficult to define, more difficult to attack. Now that happens to be a very interesting and indeed a key issue of our times, I would say. It's not the subject of this talk, and I just mean to make mention of it. So we can say that philanthropy, volunteerism, and engagement may be healthy, but I think it's also fair to say that in the area of public policy, both significant aspects of the culture and activity in the public square represent what Bella and his colleagues characterize as cancerous, and other critics would describe as unhealthy or unbalanced. I would still hope and even expect, as I did 20 years ago, that the claims of the commons and of community will be restored to their proper place in American society and its political culture. My further reflections are that there is always a tension in balancing individual autonomy and the rights of the individual and the claims of community or the state, even in a society like ours where values place the individual in the ascendancy, and that there will always be disagreements among citizens with respect to where that balance properly lies. And our public square will continue to reflect the prevailing sentiment on that issue of what the balance should be at any given point in time. And I would add that changes in our situation, such as the threat of terrorism brought home, will cause new tensions and debate, and they already have, which at one stream would tilt the balance from the individual to the primacy of community or the state. Well, how to close? Well, I'm reminded of the story told by the late Max Lerner with respect to Albert Camus, the French author, journalist, and sometime existentialist. A friend came upon him as he was committing his time and energy to create a newspaper in newly liberated France after World War II. Knowing some of Camus' philosophical writings, the friend looked at Camus and all of his frantic energy and activity with raised eyebrow. Camus looked up and said, "It's necessary to try." And I'm reminded, too, of the story often cited by Eleanor Roosevelt with respect to reactions to being engulfed in total darkness. Those who would spend their time cursing that darkness as opposed to the persons who would light a candle. Members and friends of the City Club here or elsewhere, I don't suggest that this club or we are in total darkness, but I do say, keep on trying and light those candles.
Thank you, Paul, and we are adjourned.
Thank you for asking me to do this. Okay, same here. a great experience. One of the other weird things is that the times I've been sat out here and seen all the other former presidents.
We do recycle.
Doug, congratulations. Great job.